Can you guess where we are vacationing? I think you probably know. You got it. We're at the beach. Hey everybody, I am here on vacation at the beach. I intended to get this video uploaded yesterday, which was Saturday, but things just didn't work out the way I wanted. You know, when you're a mom, and especially when you're on vacation, well, you just never know what's going to happen. So I am trying to get this finished and get it uploaded today. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Allison, for those of you that are new, and this is the Furniture Flipping Family. I am so excited that you have decided to join us today. If you would, go on ahead and subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell so that you will be notified every time I upload a new video. And guys, if you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up before it's over. This is part 2 of the desk. So, is everybody ready to learn something? All right, well, let's get started. All right, so I've moved everything outside because I have put the primer on, and now it is time to sand the primer so that I can get a smoother finish when I put on the chalk paint. When you are sanding the primer, you don't want to sand it too hard, so I'm using a 220 grit. Now I'm using my sand block because it gives me a little more control over what I'm doing. Notice how I run my hand over what I've sanded. That's just to make sure that it feels smooth and that I've gotten it to the texture that I want it. So the sanding is done, and once you finish the sanding, then take a lint-free cloth and you need to wipe it down to make sure there's no dust, no particles, no hair, no nothing on the paint or left on that surface, because you don't want that in your paint. And then we're going to be ready for our first coat. Okay, I'm using my spray bottle to help the paint go on a little easier because the chalk paint is so thick. It is a little more difficult to work with unless you put the water on there. When you're getting ready to paint, you don't want to put too much water on there, but you want to spray it just enough where it thins out the paint a little bit and it makes it easier to manipulate. Now, when you're painting the details, you want to make sure that you're getting that paint in all of the details. So you want to make sure you're running it in between, and that you're also putting it on the sides because you don't want it to show when you put the drawers in. Now, I love painting, and what I was most concerned about here is the fact that we are trying to make sure that we get some good coverage. So I didn't want the paint to go on too thick, but I also didn't want to put it on too thin. Okay, first coat of chalk paint done. I definitely am glad that I used the water. It helped me to manipulate a little more. I can tell that I'm having a little trouble with coverage. I'm wondering if 3 coats of chalk paint are going to work, or if I'm gonna have to try something different. We'll just have to wait and see. So I gave the desk a second coat of paint last night so it could dry overnight so I could see if we were still having some bleed through. And I am. So I did a little more research this morning to find out what I needed to do, because the amount of bleed through, I just didn't feel like a third coat was going to cover it. And I did not want to put 10 coats of paint on this. So I did some research, and shellac, clear shellac is the answer for this if you've already painted and if you want to distress. Now, I could have used white shellac if I had not already painted and I wasn't going to distress, but I am going to do that, so I wanted to use the clear. Now, what I read also tells me that there is a product out by Dixie Belle that is called Boss, and that you can use the Boss if you want to cover up some of those stains. But again, I don't have that. So I went and I got the shellac this morning. I've already done one coat just to see what it did and to make sure I knew what I was doing, and it went on good. I sanded a little bit with 220 just in a couple of spots to make sure that that it wasn't running or anything like that. So now I'm ready to put on the second coat of shellac. Now this shellac is fast drying, so it says it dries in 15 minutes, but I did wait 30 minutes before I checked it, and when I touched it, it was completely dry. Now they did say you need to be in a well ventilated area, so I am outside. I had to come downstairs now because it is already 87 degrees here, and sitting out in the sun working on this was torture. So I'm at least in the shade. So let's get started with the second coat of shellac. Now you don't want to get the shellac too thick, and you also don't want it to clump up and run. Okay, now we are done with the second coat of shellac, and we wait for just a little while. I'm going to wait about 30 minutes again and then check it. I did notice that I had a little bubble right here, so I'm definitely going to have to sand it just a little bit. And when I do that, I'm only going to use a 220 because that's just a fine sandpaper. So it's not going to rub off a lot. I'm just going to do a little light sanding just to kind of get those bubbles out so it's smooth. Now, as usual, first you want to sand, and then you want to wipe away all of the dust. Now I'm starting to put on the second coat. Well, actually, it's the first coat of paint after the shellac, so we'll see if it works to help with the coverage. Now I am spraying water into the can and stirring it around, and then I'm also going to spray the paintbrush so that I have plenty of water so that when I start painting, it will be thin enough and I'll be able to manipulate it. Of course, Puggers likes to check everything out. Make sure that when you're painting, you are going up and down, you're going in the same direction every time, and you also want to go with the grain of the wood. As much as you can. Then I go sideways on the bottom. Yes, we are in the home stretch. All right, we have gotten the top stained, we have gotten the bottom painted, and now it is time to distress. So I've already tested 2 drawers. And what I've discovered is I think because I have had to put so many layers on it that the 180 that I was trying to use wasn't going to be strong enough. So I've wrapped 60 around it, and that seems to be working. So let's get started on distressing some of this detail. When you start the sanding, you just want to sand until some of the paint starts flaking off. In some areas, you're going to sand a little bit harder than others to show the distressing. Now, you don't want to distress the whole thing. You just want to distress where you think there would be some wear on your desk. Okay, this is what it looks like so far. I think it's looking pretty good. Huh? Pretty good. And that's what you want. You don't want it too uniform. You just want it to show where there would be some wear. Okay, I have had to get out my sander because that was going to take all day, and it was just getting really difficult. So I've gotten out the sander, and we are about to distress the drawers. Okay, I ended up getting a new piece of sandpaper, and all I have to do is put it on here, and it Velcros on just like that. Now, with this sander, I have to be a little more gentle than I did when I was using just a piece of sandpaper. All right, here we go. Remember, when you're using the electric sander, that you don't want to press too hard. You want to be careful on how much you are distressing because you want this to look as authentic as possible. So you only want to distress on the parts that would show natural wear. Now is one of the most important parts, because you need to get all of the dust off of the desk before you put the polyurethane on the top and before you put the wax on the rest of the desk. Now, you definitely, especially after you've worked so hard to get your project done, you definitely want to seal it so that nothing happens to it. All right, I'm using a lint-free cloth, and I'm just going back and forth to make sure that I get all of the dust off of the top. Then I'm going to move on to the sides. Make sure I get it out of the corners, off of the legs. Puggers is trying to check everything out. Okay, it is time to put on the polyurethane, which is the top coat for the stain. Now, I'm not putting the same thing on this that I'm putting on the bottom. So we're going to start with the top. Now, what you do is you put the polyurethane on here, let it dry, and then lightly sand when you're finished. And then apply a second coat. And we want to make sure we apply plenty of polyurethane to the top because the top of the desk is going to be a high traffic area. All right, so I'm using a water-based polyurethane. Now, I am going to put it on with a foam brush, which I've seen lots of people do. Then you want to go in one direction. You want to go with the wood grain. I am using a matte because I didn't want it to be too shiny. Now we let it dry, and now we're going to work on the wax on the bottom. Here I'm using a brush to put the wax on. And I'm basically painting the wax on just like I would regular paint. You want to kind of work it into the paint. Then you want to wipe off the excess. Right, I'm also making sure that I get it in those creases or crevices because there are places that are sticking out and then there's an indention in there. Now I'm making sure that I get the excess out of the corners because you don't want any buildup. You want to make sure that you get the whole desk, especially when you're using chalk paint because chalk paint has a tendency to chip off easily. So you want to protect your work. You'll notice that I'm using 2 cloths now. That's because the paintbrush got a little tedious. So I decided to use a cloth to put on the wax and then a cloth to wipe off the excess wax. And that seemed to work a lot better. And it also went a little bit faster. Comment below which way you like to do your wax. The polyurethane has dried that is on top of here. So now we're going to take a fine grit sandpaper, which is, I'm using the 220. I have wrapped it around my little sponge just so that it's easier for me to do and I have more control over it. And all we're going to do is lightly sand just to kind of buff it up. And then we're going to put another coat of polyurethane on it. Make sure you sand the whole top wherever you've put the polyurethane. And when you are finished, take your lint-free cloth and make sure that you get all of the dust off before you start putting your second coat of polyurethane on there. Guys, I am so excited. The desk is finally done. We are finished. The only thing we have left is to stage it, take the pictures, and then I'm going to put it on Facebook Marketplace. I know you can see it in the background, and I'm going to show you it up close in just a few minutes. But I just wanted to kind of recap what all has happened. We had a lot of bleed through. I had to do some research and figure out what we needed to do. We finally figured that out. Now, there are some other products that you can use, and I'll put that in the description. So depending on where you are in your painting process depends on what you're going to use to help you cover up that bleed through. Now, I am excited that we finally figured that out, because that was really, really an issue. Now, another thing that I just ran into a few minutes ago when I was putting the pulls on is somehow one of the pulls has disappeared. I have no idea where it went. I have looked high and low. I thought I had them all together, and evidently I did not. So I have put this pull in the middle, and then the original hardware is still on the rest of the desk. I think it looks good. I don't think it looks bad at all. Hopefully I'll find that pull at some point, but like I said, I looked everywhere and I don't see it at all. So I don't know what happened to it. So we're going to get started on staging and taking the pictures. Okay, this is what it looks like. The dogs do not want to get out of the way. Here is the top. And then you can see how we distressed it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let me know what you think in the comments below. All right, now I'm getting ready to stage it. Staging is an important part of the process because you want to make your furniture pleasing to the buyer. You want them to be able to imagine how that piece of furniture would look in their home. You're not going to believe it. I don't think I even believe it. Okay, I was about to take the measurements to put on Facebook Marketplace. I was walking around putting some things up, and guess what? I found the pull. After all that, I mean, I looked everywhere. And I even looked over where I found it. But it evidently had fallen onto the Barbie house, and I didn't see it. But now I've got it, so now I need to spray paint it so I can put it on the drawer, and now I just have an extra pull. Okay, so now I'm going to have to retake pictures. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope that you learned as much as I did through this process. I hope this gives you the courage to try something new, to maybe redo some of the furniture that you have. And you can call it creative flipping too, because sometimes we just have to fit this in between all of the things that we have to do. Especially when you're a busy mom and maybe you work or you volunteer, or, you know, no matter what it is, it's hard to fit these things into our schedule sometimes. But you can do it. It can be done because we did it. I will see you next time for more creative flipping.